The news of Greg's sudden death still felt surreal in the days that followed. One moment, I was brushing off the usual worries and annoyances of life, living in the comfortable routine of a married woman. And the next, I was facing an enormous loss that I hadn't prepared for. Greg's passing left a hole in my heart, and I struggled to breathe through the grief and sorrow. We had built our life together in this home, our home. The house was the foundation of everything. Our love, our family, our memories. Losing Greg felt like losing the very ground beneath my feet. Jake, my only son, was devastated, as expected. He had always been close to his father, and the bond they shared was evident even in the hardest times. He had his own family now, with Carla and their 2 young children, but I could always count on him to be there when it mattered. We had raised him together, and I had watched him become a man that I was proud of. The house had been a constant presence in his life as well. It was where he came home to visit, where he celebrated holidays with us, and where he had shared countless memories of growing up. After Greg's funeral, I found myself alone, more often than I expected. It was difficult to navigate the silence. In a house that had once been so full of life, I kept myself busy, sorting through Greg's belongings, organizing his personal items, and trying to make sense of everything. I wasn't sure how to move forward without him, but I couldn't imagine letting go of everything. I felt like the house was all I had left. Every room seemed to hold a memory of Greg, his favorite chair in the living room, his desk in the study where he spent hours working, the backyard where we had spent summer evenings together. A few weeks after the funeral, I noticed that Jake and Carla had started to act differently toward me. They still visited regularly, and we kept up appearances, trying to maintain some normalcy. But there was a shift in the dynamic that I couldn't ignore. Jake, who had always been open and loving, began to seem distant, almost aloof. And Carla, my daughter-in-law, who had been so warm and friendly in the past, was acting strangely reserved, like she was keeping something from me. It was subtle at first, but I couldn't help but feel that something was wrong. Then, one afternoon, after the kids had gone home, and it was just the 3 of us sitting in the living room, Carla dropped the bombshell. "Mum, we need to talk," she said, her voice soft but purposeful. It wasn't a casual remark. It was the kind of tone that immediately made me sit up straighter, sensing that something was about to be said that would change everything. I looked over at Jake, who was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, looking unusually quiet. He met my eyes for a moment, then quickly looked away. A knot formed in my stomach. My son, who I had always been able to talk to openly, was now avoiding my gaze. I felt the first stirrings of fear. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You both look so serious. Is something wrong?" Carla hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath before she spoke again. "We've been talking, Jake and I," she began, her voice measured, "and we think it's time for you to sell the house." I blinked, unsure if I had heard her correctly. "What?" I asked, a little more sharply than I intended. "What? Do you mean sell the house? This is where I've lived for years, where I raised you, Jake. This is my home." Carla's face was unreadable, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. It wasn't anger, at least not exactly, but it was something I hadn't seen before. Determination. She was resolute. "We've discussed it, and we really think it's the right time. You've been living here alone, and with all the space, it's just not practical anymore. We're worried about you, Mom. It's too much to maintain. You need to downsize, and we want to help you with that." My chest tightened, and I struggled to keep the flood of emotions at bay. "I don't need to downsize," I said, my voice rising slightly in protest. "This house is where Greg and I built our life together. It's where I've lived for the past 30 years. You can't just ask me to sell it. Carla looked at me, her expression soft but firm. It's not about asking you, Mom. It's about what's best for you. We know you're getting older, and this house is too big for you to manage on your own. We want to help you move into something more manageable. Something easier for you to take care of. I was shaking my head now, my emotions bubbling to the surface. You don't understand, Carla, I said, my voice breaking. This house is where I've lived with Greg. It's where we raised our children, where we made memories. I can't just sell it. You don't get to tell me what to do with my life or my home. This place is mine. Jake finally spoke, his voice quieter but still carrying weight. Mum, we're not trying to upset you. We're just trying to do what's best for you. You've always said that it's too much for you to handle. We're just trying to help. The room seemed to spin around me. I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of their words. How could they do this? How could they ask me to give up the one thing that had been a constant in my life for decades? The house was a part of me. It was where I had raised them, where Greg and I had spent countless hours planning our future together. It was all I had left of him. Jake, I whispered, my voice trembling. This house is not just a property. It's my home. It's where I've spent my life. How can you ask me to sell it? You grew up here. This is where you had your childhood. How can you ask me to just give that up? Jake avoided my eyes again, his voice low. I don't want to hurt you, Mom, but I don't want you to be alone in this big house. Carla and I are already thinking about our future. And this house, it's not the right fit anymore. We think it's time for you to move on. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The anger and sadness swelled in me like a tidal wave, but I didn't want to show it. I couldn't let them see how hurt I was. I'm not selling, Jake, I said firmly, standing up from my chair. I won't. This is my home, and I'm not giving it up. Not for you, not for Carla. It's mine. Carla stood up too, her face flushed with frustration. This is about what's best for you, she exclaimed. We want to help you, but if you refuse, we can't keep doing this. You're being unreasonable. You need to let go of the past and think about the future. I felt the sting of her words deep in my chest. I'm not unreasonable, I snapped, the anger rising now. I'm not ready to let go. And you have no right to decide what's best for me. Jake stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Mum, we're just trying to help. Please just think about it. I couldn't listen to any more. I stormed out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. How had we gotten here? How had my family, my own son and daughter-in-law come? To the point where they thought they had the right to take my home from me. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know if I could. The following days after the conversation with Carla and Jake felt like I was walking through a haze. My world had been upended in an instant. The house, the place where I had spent most of my life, the place where Greg and I had built a family, was no longer my own in the eyes of my son and daughter-in-law. I couldn't shake the weight of their words, the pressure to let go of everything I had built. I wandered through the rooms of the house, running my fingers over the edges of old photographs and touching the surfaces of furniture that had been a part of our lives for decades. The kitchen counters where Greg had prepared his famous Sunday roasts, the dining room table where we had shared laughter and stories, the worn-out armchair in the corner where Greg would fall asleep after long. Days at work, all of it felt like part of me. How could they ask me to just give all of this up? But despite the anger and hurt that I felt, a nagging voice in the back of my mind began to whisper, maybe they're right. Maybe this house is too much for you to handle on your own. Maybe it's time to move on. I hated that voice. I resented it. It felt like a betrayal to the years I had spent here, the memories that were embedded in every nook and cranny. That the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was no longer living in the house that Greg and I had shared. The house had become a prison, a reminder of all that I had lost, of the empty space where Greg used to be. I wasn't just grieving his death anymore. I was grieving the life we had once had. The house was now a constant reminder of the void he had left behind. Still, the thought of selling it made me sick to my stomach. I didn't want to give up my home, but I couldn't ignore the fact that things had changed. And as much as it hurt to admit it, I knew that if I didn't let go, the tension between us would only grow. I thought about calling Jake and Carla, sitting down with them, and trying to work something out. But each time I picked up the phone, I felt paralyzed, unsure of what to say. I was angry, hurt, and confused. I didn't know how to bridge the chasm that had opened between us then. One evening, I received a call from a real estate agent. "Hello, Mrs. Harris," the voice on the other end of the phone said, sounding pleasant but businesslike. "I just wanted to follow up on our previous conversation. You've decided to list the property, correct?" I hesitated. The decision felt like it was happening too quickly. But the truth was, I had already made up my mind. "Yes," I said. Quietly, "I'm ready." The agent seemed relieved. "Great. We can schedule the first showings right away. This house is beautiful, and I know we'll have no trouble finding a buyer." I swallowed hard as I hung up the phone. It was real now. I was selling the house. The decision that I had fought so hard against was finally happening. And yet, as I stood in the living room, staring at the empty spaces around me, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of release. It wasn't a victory, not by any means, but it was the end of a chapter I couldn't keep holding on to. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparations. The realtor came over to assess the house, make suggestions for staging, and take photographs. There were inspections and repairs to be done. I spent hours sorting through old boxes of keepsakes, photos, and memories, trying to figure out what I would take with me and what I would leave behind. It was surreal, like I was preparing for a new life, but I had no idea where that life would lead me. Jake and Carla continued to visit, but there was a palpable tension between us. I could see that they were relieved that I had agreed to sell, but I also felt like they were waiting for me to be completely on board with their decision, as though I should be grateful. Their attitude, though wrapped in concern, felt more like an imposition. They didn't understand what it was like to lose everything in a single moment, to have your whole world turned upside down. It wasn't just the house. It was the life I had built, the memories, the love. One afternoon, Carla came over to help with the packing. She walked through the house, smiling as she picked up a few items. "This place is going to look so different once you've sold it, Mum," she said, her voice chipper, but carrying an edge of something I couldn't quite place. "You'll feel so much better once you're settled into something smaller." I nodded absent-mindedly, too tired to argue. "Maybe," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "You're doing the right thing," Carla continued, her eyes bright. "It's going to be a fresh start for you. You're going to feel so much freer once it's all behind you." Her words stung. A fresh start? Was that what I was supposed to be looking forward to? I was giving up everything I had known, everything that had been mine for decades. A fresh start wasn't something I was ready for. It felt more like a forced ending. As Carla and I went through boxes of old things, her voice softened. "I know. It's hard, Mom," she said, her tone more genuine now. "But we just want what's best for you. I want you to be happy again. This house, it's just too much for you. And you deserve something easier. Something that fits where you are in your life now." I wanted to argue, to tell her that I wasn't ready, that I wasn't asking for their help. But I didn't. What was the point? I had already made my decision. I was letting go of the house. The day of the open house arrived. I had spent the morning cleaning and preparing the final touches, making sure everything was perfect for potential buyers. I stood at the kitchen counter, making coffee, trying to ignore the emptiness in my chest. The house felt like it was slipping away from me, even as I stood in it. It was no longer mine, not in the way it had been before. When the buyers came, they were young, excited, and full of plans for the house. I watched them walk through the rooms, admiring the space, already imagining what they would do with it. And all I could think was that this wasn't my home anymore. It was theirs now. And I had no say in it. As the day wore on, and the house was officially under contract, I stood alone in the living room, looking out the window. I could see the sun beginning to set, casting long shadows across the yard. It was beautiful, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. I thought about my family, how they had pushed me to sell, how they had made me feel like I wasn't capable of handling the house anymore. It wasn't their fault, not entirely. They were only trying to help, trying to do what they thought was best for me. But in the process, they had taken something from me. My home, my memories, my life. And so, as I stood there, I realized something. Selling the house wasn't just about moving on. It was about letting go. Letting go of my grief, my past, and, in a way, even the future I had imagined for myself in this space. The house had been everything to me, but now I had to move forward. Even though it hurt more than I could explain. I knew that in letting go of the house, I was also letting go of a part of myself. And as painful as that was, it was the only way I could find peace. As the new owners took over, I felt the finality of it all. My history was gone. I couldn't change that. But as I walked away from the house, I took one last look back, knowing that the future would be different. It was time to move on. The sale was finalized quickly, almost too quickly. In a way, it felt like I had been running from something. Perhaps I was running from the memories, the grief, or simply the weight of everything that had happened since Greg's passing. Whatever it was, I had let go. The house was no longer mine, and I couldn't ignore the sting of loss that seemed to settle deeper with every passing day. Jake and Carla seemed relieved, almost too relieved. They had been right about one thing: the house was too much for me to maintain on my own. The upkeep had become more than I could manage. But what they didn't understand, what I couldn't explain to them, was that the house was more than just a place to live. It was our home. The place where Greg and I had dreamed together, worked together, and built a life together. I couldn't just let it go as though it were a commodity. I moved into a small apartment not far from Jake and Carla's home. It was an efficient space, clean and modern, but devoid of the warmth and history I had known. Every morning I woke up in that empty apartment, sitting in the quiet of the new surroundings, surrounded by boxes I hadn't yet unpacked. The familiar feeling of the old house, the worn-out furniture, and the knickknacks that had once filled the space, now felt like a distant dream. Jake and Carla helped me with the move, but their support didn't feel genuine. I had expected them to be sympathetic, to be there for me. But instead, there was this palpable tension that hung in the air. It was as if, with the sale of the house, everything had been resolved, and they expected me to be over it, to move on from the past, and embrace the future. The reality, though, was that I wasn't ready to move on. I wasn't ready to leave behind everything that had meant so much to me for so long. After I settled into my new apartment, I did my best to put on a brave face. I didn't want to burden Jake and Carla with my sadness, so I kept to myself. I spent my days in the apartment, cleaning, organizing, and doing my best to make it feel like home. But the loneliness crept in, seeping into the walls of the place, reminding me that everything had changed. I visited Jake and Carla's home less frequently. The house that had once been a sanctuary for me now felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. I didn't want to be around them all the time. I didn't want to be reminded of their decision to sell my home. So I stayed away, finding solace in my solitude. One Saturday afternoon, Carla called me. She asked if I wanted to come over for dinner, and I agreed, though I had mixed feelings. The tension between us had been thick for weeks, and I wasn't sure what to expect. I hadn't really had a chance to talk to her about how I was feeling since the sale of the house. I had been avoiding the conversation, avoiding any mention of the emotional toll it had taken on me. But today, something felt different. I couldn't keep running from it. When I arrived at their house, the atmosphere was oddly subdued. Carla greeted me at the door with a warm, but somewhat strained smile. "I'm glad you could make it," she said, her tone polite but distant. It wasn't the warmth I had once received from her. It felt like there was a wall between us that neither of us knew how to break down. Dinner was pleasant enough, though. Quiet. The kids were playing in the other room, and Jake was unusually quiet. I could tell he was avoiding eye contact with me, just as he had done for the past few weeks. Every time our eyes met, he quickly looked away, as though he was unsure of what to say. After the meal, as we all sat in the living room, I couldn't stand the silence any longer. I needed to address the elephant in the room. "Jake, Carla," I said, my voice calm but filled with emotion. "I need to talk to you both. About the house. About everything." They exchanged a quick glance, and then Carla nodded, her expression guarded. "What's on your mind, Mom?" she asked, her voice quieter now, as if she knew something serious was coming. "I just want to understand," I said, looking directly at both of them. "I want to understand why you thought it was okay to make that decision for me. Why you pushed me so hard to sell the house. I know you were trying to help, but it didn't feel like help. It felt like you didn't respect me or the life I had built." Carla shifted uncomfortably in her seat, and I saw Jake tense up. He opened his mouth to speak, but then hesitated, clearly unsure of how to approach the conversation. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, we didn't want to hurt you," he said, his voice strained. "We just wanted what's best for you. The house was too much for you. It was too big, too empty. And we thought it would be better for everyone if you downsized. If you had something easier to take care of." I felt my chest tighten. "I understand that you thought you were doing what was best for me," I said, my voice trembling. "But I don't think you understood how much it meant to me. It wasn't just about the house. It was about losing Greg. It was about everything I've known for all these years. And when you pushed me to sell, it felt like you were taking away the last piece of him." There was a long silence as my words hung in the air. Jake and Carla both looked at each other, their faces softening slightly. Finally, Carla spoke up, her voice quieter now. "I had no idea how much it was hurting you," she admitted. "I thought it was what was best, but I didn't realize how much it meant to you. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I didn't mean to make you feel like you were being pushed aside." Jake nodded in agreement. "We should have been more patient. We should have given you more time. I can't imagine what it's been like for you." Hearing those words from them felt like a weight lifting off my chest. I hadn't expected an apology, especially from Carla, but it was the first step in mending the rift between us. The anger and resentment that had built up between us in the weeks since the sale seemed to dissipate in that moment. "I don't expect you to understand everything I've been feeling," I said softly. "But I want you both to know that I'm trying to move on." It's just been harder than I thought. The house wasn't just a place to live. It was my home. And letting go of it has been the hardest thing I've ever done. Carla reached over and took my hand, her grip firm but gentle. I'm sorry. Mum, I didn't realize how much you were hurting. We should have been there for you. Jake spoke up next. We just wanted to help, but I see now that we went about it the wrong way. I'm sorry too, Mom. The sincerity in their voices surprised. Emmy, it wasn't a perfect fix, but it was a start. We weren't back to the way things had been before, but I felt a shift. We had finally broken through the wall of hurt and misunderstanding that had been building for weeks. As the evening wore on, we continued to talk, sharing stories and memories of Greg, of our family, and of the past few weeks. It wasn't easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving forward, not by erasing the past, but by acknowledging the pain and finding a way to heal together. By the end of the evening, as I stood to leave, Carla hugged me tightly. I'm glad we talked, she said. I think this was good for all of us. Me too, I whispered, holding on to her for a moment longer than usual. Me too. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't easy, but it was a step in the right direction. It was a start, and that was all I needed.